Welcome to this week's episode of the Aiming Five-Hole Podcast. We're a day late, dollar short, but we got some good reasons for it. Holiday cheer going on. Schedules are a little bit all over the place, but some important games to get to. How's it going, Ryan?
It's going well, Phil. Good to talk to you again, especially
You got to be happy
especially
tonight.
I'm very happy that we delayed the podcast by 24 hours because at this point they've just started the third period in Montreal and Patrick Laine has a hat trick and the Canadians are up 6-1. So I'm off the couch. That's for
It is the battle of the basement of the Eastern Conference. Sorry, I had to go there.
Oh well, hey, I'll
Hey,
take any win
they're
I can
looking
get.
good. I'm just, you know what? I'm just trying to add a little spice to this a little bit. They are looking good. So it's nice to see them playing well. And you go ahead. You shine. You got your moment here for a
I've
second.
got yeah, exactly. I'm off the couch at least for a day. You're not gonna get you $300 an hour this week. I'm sorry, Phil.
Well, I'm gonna find ways of putting you there. It's like that comment I made up the top about the Eastern Conference. At least look at least they're climbing. Getting out of
They-
the
They're,
basement.
they're getting out of the basement.
Oh, but what the hell is this mess going on in Buffalo? Well, let's finish on your Montreal Canadiens, and
Yeah,
then we can go to Buffalo or New York or Nashville, whichever place you want to
yeah,
go.
exactly. Okay, so we'll stick with the good side of the ledger. Like they lost in Winnipeg, but they didn't look bad. They played hard. They didn't give up. It wasn't a collapse like it was against the Penguins, which was so frustrating. But that was the team that didn't know how to get out of their own way and found a way to do it anyway. Um, so yeah, but a couple of games that are trending in the right direction, and they've got some easy games over the net. Well, not easy games, but games against peers in the
Yeah, well,
standings
there's
over the
games you
net.
got to win, right? These are the
Yeah,
games against teams like Buffalo who are 0 and 10 now. Well, let's just call it a spade a spade. They're going to be 0 and 11 after tonight.
11.
You got to win these
Now,
games, right? You got to take advantage
thanks
of
for
these
jinxing it.
moments.
Thanks for jinxing it.
Hey, you guys lose 6-1 tonight after being up 6-1 in the third period. Somebody needs to lose a job.
Agreed.
But how good does
Agreed.
it look
Agreed. Agreed.
like Patrick Laine? We talked about this weeks ago when he came back, how he's going to change the dynamic of the team and scoring some goals, and he's like scoring in bunches. It's good to see. He's gone through a lot of crap. I was probably a naysayer on him overall as a player, but you know what? It looks like he's found a home and he's thriving
Yeah,
at the moment, which is great.
yeah. He's got three identical power play goals. The only downside,
A couple
and
of
you
great
know,
passes. Suzuki made one of the passes. I don't know who, but
yeah,
Doc made the one. Oh, that was hit the post, the
yeah,
one out of the back behind the net.
yeah.
But
But the only concern I have, because I've got to find a dark side to everything, right, is that Laine scoring all these goals from the spot that Caulfield was occupying before, and Caulfield, well, he's getting some assists on all of these goals for sure, has stopped scoring since Laine came back. And you want Laine to be additive. You don't want him to just replace
yeah,
what
and I
Cole
think he
Caulfield
will.
is doing.
They got to find their stride together, right? So
Yeah,
it'll
they'll figure it
happen.
out. But
Yeah, yeah. But I think it was
you know,
important to get Line off to a hot start, and he's done that in the game since he's been back. He's
yeah,
fulfilling the potential promise and the potentialness of having him out in the lineup. So which is great.
yes.
Yeah. So
Yes, I agree. So, that's where we are with the Habs. Not much to say beyond that. It's a good night. But let's talk about the
at
knee
least
pebble heard around the world.
oh geez, look at I terrible. Look at last week. He stole the game for them. Stole the game and absolutely stole that game in New Jersey. They had no
Yeah,
business winning that hockey game. If it wasn't for him, it would have been really ugly.
that was
And then for
Carey
him to go,
Price-esque.
yeah, and for him to go down now, and it looks like he's going to be out 4 to 6 weeks with a minor, they found a minor knee procedure, something floating around in his knee, which is never good for a goaltender.
A pebble.
Yeah, so
What happened?
whatever
Where
that
does a
means.
pebble come from?
I don't know. I don't know
Is that
what that
bone?
means. I don't know if it's a bone spur that's gotten loose or something. He's had a couple of knee procedures as well already. So this is something that's sort of floating around, leftover remnants that's gotten in the way. So, but you got to hope that he's been a difference maker to this team. You got to hope he comes back strong. But now it goes to look, we had Wool was playing well. So you need him to step up here. You need him to stay healthy. And you need him to play the way he's been playing this year to at least keep the truck rolling around. The Leafs have been hit by the injury bug pretty badly. Some guys are coming back, which is good, but then to lose Stolhartz is a big miss. So, and they've got three back-to-back games coming up over the next couple of weeks. So, it's going to be really important that Wool puts in some extra time here, get some extra playing time, but then Hildeby is going to have to play, and he's going to have to play better than he did in Buffalo because he looked bad in their loss to not lost to Buffalo, sorry, their loss to Detroit. Who they lose to yeah, it was Detroit.
Detroit.
Lost to on Saturday night. He looked terrible. But
so the question becomes then, like, do you just, you're fine in the standings. Do you just play the goalies in order to reduce the risk of injury, give everybody a rest? It doesn't, if you don't win all these games, it's fine. You're doing fine in the standings. Just,
yeah, I think there's
just sort of play it out for the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Yeah, if I'm the coach here, I think you've got to show the confidence in Wool. So you got to play him as much as you can. The back-to-backs, you're not going to play him for the exactly reason here. You don't want to risk injury. You want to give him some spells of off time here, but I think you need to give him a chance to showcase what he could do if he has to play in over a longer stretch of period of time, because the back and forth is great during the regular season. It's not happening in the playoffs unless
no.
The win and lose. So you've got to show some endurance here and whatnot. But you're right; they don't want to get him injured with Stolhartz out. But the Leafs can't play in front of Wool the way they did last week in front of Stolhartz because they just can't do that. And the last week, although they went 3-1, it was a bad 3-1.
I heard about it.
Bad all three. Yeah, I was on touch last week. All three games they looked bad. For 4 games they looked bad. And they got lucky. The game against Buffalo, they had a bad period. They in the first period, and then they turned it on. But they've got to get better. And we've talked about this. Teams throughout the year go through stretches of playing poorly. The Leafs are kind of in that one. It's hard to say that after a 3-1 week, but they didn't look good doing it, and they're in that little bit of a stretch. Again, I think the two most important things over the next couple of weeks the Leafs need to do is Will needs to play, and they got to get through the Stolhartz injury, and we need to get some secondary scoring. If the guys from the top 2 lines aren't scoring, nobody's scoring on this team.
Right, which is why we talked about them needing another
exactly.
forward.
It was good to see Domi get off the schneid. Hey, Ron, I'll give it to you. Domi, for those listeners out there, Ron, another friend of ours who's a Leaf fan's on me about Domi. I'm on him about Robertson. Robertson finally get one, but Domi made him look good on it. So, anyways, we need more of that. We need more from that bottom 6 scoring goals. And look, you're right. We're in a good spot. Let's keep the truck rolling. Let's keep people healthy. Let's get guys back and see what happens over the next month and a half. But let's move on
now I've got
more fun things. Like, what mess do we want to go to? What is the biggest mess right now in the NHL? The fact that the Sabres are about to go 0-11, and their owner's flying out to their game to talk to the team. Nashville is 1-6-3 in their last 10. The Rangers are 3-7, and it seems like there's a mutiny going on in the change room against not just the coach, but probably more so against the GM. Like,
the GM meeting.
What is the biggest mess in the NHL?
Before we get to which turd pile is the biggest, I want to ask you, given his play over the last 2 weeks,
okay, there you go.
Maybe 3, are you shifting your thoughts on Marner?
I'm going to stick with what I've said from the beginning. If they can't sign him to a long-term deal on a somewhat, I wouldn't say team-friendly, but a fair deal, he can't get paid more than Matthews, then they need to deal him before the end of the year, before the trade deadline. I'm going to stick to that. And
so it's an economic question.
I still believe
he's been the best player on the team.
No question. Absolutely. But he's not, you're not paying him $14 million a year, because what's going to happen is what's happening now. The top 2 lines play well, and if they don't, they lose, right? And you can't build this team paying 4 or 5 guys what they're paying these guys, because then you're just going to have fluff around them. And the fluff around them, look, I love the Leafs. I hope they make a run in the playoffs this year, but this team with the bottom 6 is not winning the Stanley Cup. And if you don't
Okay.
think you can do that and you can't get Marner signed to a deal where you think you can build the team better, the top six are great. Nyes has proven he's got some juice. Um, McCann has shown flashes. Minton has now showed a little flashes. This Grbrenkin kid looks like he's going to be good. You're going to have Cowan up here next year, but you need to build that bottom six to something that we've changed over the bottom six 3 years in a row, and look where that's gotten us.
Nowhere.
If
Nowhere.
you
Okay.
can't do it, then you need to trade him. I'm going
Okay.
to stick with that.
Okay. So you got to trade him before Nylander.
Yeah, because yeah,
Okay.
Nylander's a
Um,
bit what I would say a friendly deal at this point. He's leading the team in goals, like, and he's looked great. He's still defensive lapses, but he's looked brilliant on the offensive side. And
all right.
I flip flopped on this.
You flip flopped on it to be
I'm
sure.
staying
All right.
strong on this one. So let's go to the turd pile. What
Okay.
is the biggest turd pile in the
The
NHL right
parade
now?
of deplorables. So,
Fuck. Excuse my
in
language.
terms of disappointment factor, I would rank them as follows: New York, Nashville, Buffalo. With New
Which
York being the biggest disappointment because they were President's Trophy winners last year. They were
uh,
supposed to compete for a Stanley Cup, and they look awful.
terrible.
And what's are they still losing to
Yeah, they're down one
Nashville?
nothing. They're down one nothing. I think it's in the first intermission. It is just
Okay,
5 minutes into the second period, and they're down one nothing.
what not? Okay, so I think it goes a little bit deeper in New York than the other two cities, and the reason is they're pissed off at their GM,
Well, there's a
right?
full-on mutiny going on.
Oh, like they had that meeting with Drury where they said you got to change the way you do things and the way you treat us, or this isn't going to work. The Truba situation was apparently handled as badly as we thought it was being handled, just by public reports.
Terrible.
Now you've got Chris Kreider on the block, who was at one point captain material for this team, and
Yeah.
one of the most beloved players in the city. And okay, what are you trading him for? Defensive strength? Like
They
you,
just
the thing with this team was that they were always a power play monster last year, and they couldn't score goals 5-on-5. And so now you're going to trade away Chris Kreider to bring in more D, and that's supposed to help your 5-on-5 game.
yeah. I agree with 100%. Like it's tough. Like for me, I hear everything you're saying on the Rangers. Um, but they're only 1 or 2 points out of a playoffs picture, right? So
Yeah,
there's
but where were they
time.
supposed to
No,
be?
I understand that, but there's time for them to right the ship. If they
Mm-hmm.
can make some moves, I think you got to fire the coach. I think you got to fire the GM at some point. If the problem is Jury's also president, right? So
Yeah,
he's also the team's alternate what do you call it for going to the NHL meetings? Governor.
but alternate
So
governor. Yeah.
the governor. So he's gonna be tough to get rid of him. So and he probably realizes that. So do I get rid of Laviolette? I don't know. But here's my problem when you put the toss up at who's the bigger disappointment. Yes, the Rangers are having a really bad swing right at this moment, but the Predators are underachieving at levels like we thought they had a competitive team to maybe compete in the division, to maybe go on to the Stanley Cup final, make a deep run in the playoffs. They have currently, right now, no player that has scored more than 9 goals.
Yeah, Marchessault got his eighth in this game, I think. But
That is, yeah. So it's just to me that is such an underwhelming, and they're minus. What are they minus? They're minus like it's just ridiculous. They're minus 28 with a great goaltender. They are actually battling for last. They are last place statistically right now in the NHL. They're in the place where Chicago is. How is that not the biggest turd pile going on right now? And how Burnett has kept his job, I don't know.
I don't understand how they can be. I mean, throw San Jose in there. How can they be in the same breath as San Jose?
And that's why I say that. It's just
But
going from
look,
Stanley Cup contender to dead last in the yes, Rangers are playing crappy right now and crap going on there, but they have time to turn it around this year. There is no time. Nashville might as well just blow this thing up right now and start new.
All right. The one thing I will say about Nashville, I said it at the beginning of the year, they were top heavy, both up front and in the back, right? They had three top, they were three deep on D and they were two lines deep and forward. And you can't win in the NHL playing that, especially if those two top lines don't deliver what they're supposed to.
Agree
And
100%.
and I think there's a coaching issue in there as well. What was really interesting to me was the game against Montreal. Every time they had a power play, the commentators, and I can't remember who it was. I don't think it might have been Galley. I don't think it was Mike Johnson. They kept harping on the fact that Steven Stamkos isn't being set up in his, on his circle dot for the one timer. That was his bread and butter in Tampa Bay. That's what he does best on the power play. And he didn't get. I mean, I think on like their fourth power play, they finally got set up for one, and he missed the net with a shot.
Right.
But they were just harping on the fact that how do you have a guy like Steven Stamkos and just waste him on the power play like that by not
Oh,
getting him the puck?
it's clear that the changes they made in the offseason and bringing in what we had thought 240 goal scorers that would help this team. And yes, we said it from the beginning, and you made it crystal clear. They were going to have problems on the back end, meaning defense and keeping pucks out of the net. But they had Suros there that hopefully was going to offset that. And hopefully they were going to be able to outscore what their problem was last year. And into the playoffs, they couldn't outscore anybody. They couldn't
Right.
score. And they're having that problem, even though they added this depth in scoring. And you're right, they just haven't meshed. They brought in these two guys who just haven't changed the dynamic of this team. And it's actually gone backwards. And which is why I think, we'll talk about Buffalo in a second. It is potentially like it's not a 1, 2, 3 in terms of dog pile right here. It's 1A, 1B, and 1C. It's really tough to figure out what the biggest mess is, which is,
Yeah.
Nashville's such a big mess, but and not scoring. And I said that about in terms of you look at even New York. They've only got one guy that scored 10 goals in Kreider. Um, and they're not
Wait.
talking.
Panarin's
Oh,
got
sorry,
more than
Panarin is
10.
15. My apologies. You're right, right. I thought I had my thing on goals. Sorry, there's three guys that have over 10 goals. So they're better off, but still, this team is just not. They didn't make a lot of changes in the offseason. This is a significant part of this team before they traded Truba this year. They only
Right.
made a couple of changes in the offseason, right? So this team is really underperforming. But again, I would say there's time to fix it.
Right.
Then you slide into Buffalo. 3 weeks ago, we were talking about them. Okay, we weren't. I was. You called Ottawa, and you may be right. I said Buffalo was actually going to be the team that's going to climb in there, only a couple points out of a playoffs position, and then I gave them the kiss of death. They're now 0-11,
Yeah.
and it even to the point where Lindy Ruff, who is a world-class coach and has done a lot in this league as a player, as a coach, as an executive, and he's out there saying, I have no idea what to do and how to break us out of this thing, and I got to figure it out. It's on me. I got to figure this out. And their owner's flying into Montreal to give the team I don't know, a pep talk to sort of try and figure out what's going on. Like, oh my God.
To
Doesn't
me,
help
it's
that Gallen's out, but
it's got to be cultural,
oh,
right? Like you can't be this bad for this long and have so many great draft picks. Now, some of them have worked out better than others. Who did they draft? And Alex Nylander turned out
yeah.
not to be a great first round pick. I think he was definitely a top 10 pick.
Yeah.
Your Jack Eichel situation screwed the pooch a lot, but you know what? That's kind of like what the Rangers are doing now, right? Like
Right.
the Trouba situation showed a lack of player first sensibility that the Sabres showed with Eichel and the whole surgery thing. Now they were starting to think about that relationship started to go south, pretty early on when they said they were going to start thinking about a rebuild. And Jack Eichel was like, I don't know if I want to be around for that,
Right.
but you can repair that, right?
Right.
You can find a way to manage that, and they didn't, and they just handled the whole thing badly. They and the players as a result are just like they're not as invested in the team and winning as players on other teams. That's the first thing I'd say about Buffalo.
But that, I
The
think you made
second
a,
thing,
sorry, go ahead. You finish and then
this
I was going to add on
sure,
to that.
the second thing I'd say about Buffalo, and I'm seeing it again tonight in this game, is like I don't understand how a team with draft picks like Tage Thompson, Peyton Krebs can be so horribly defensively down the middle on a Lindy Ruff coach team. How is that possible?
I said it to you in a text earlier tonight. They look like a wreck team out there, running around, not knowing where what their duties are in their own zone. And again, Lindy Ruff is a great coach, and if he can't get through to these guys and make them play properly, I don't know. But I don't know if you finished your statement there, but I want to go back to what you said in terms of culture. I think you're right because there was a Kevin Adams interview earlier this week, and he was talking about culture in this, not just culture within this team, it's culture within the hockey community. There's a lot of players who have said the Buffalo Sabres are on a lot of people's no trade list, and people don't want to go there. It's a great hockey town with a really high IQ, a fan base,
Yeah,
and it's a great hockey town, but players just don't want to go there. It's also Buffalo, but which is really sad. So it's hard to get players there, and you have to prove you can win in order to attract players who want to go. Like you said, uh, Eichel didn't want to be there anymore. Lots of players, Reinhart didn't want to be there anymore. So many players have gone, get me the hell out of here in the last 10 years. And that's the problem. It's built around the NHL, and you got these guys going trade to other teams and going, you don't want to go there. It's a bad situation. Which brings me to the situation that's not just there, but let's take it to New York because I think it's the same thing. It's a culture issue. And
yeah.
you've got
Before
two
you do,
ex-players. Sorry, go ahead.
just to amplify your point, like geographically, weather, hockey city character, there is no difference between Buffalo and Detroit,
No
and yet the
question.
cultures could not be more different.
Not,
Like players want to go to Detroit.
but that was going to be my next point in terms of who they got running their organizations. You look at
Yeah,
someone like Steve Yzerman, who was a really well-respected player, dug his teeth in and learned a lot in Tampa Bay and then came back to his home tendy. But then you look at, is Kevin Adams and Drury the right guys in New York and in Buffalo? Like did the GM in both cities, like there's been some problems in the offseason with Kevin Adams, like some of the things he said in the press and how he talked about the players and stuff. And now that's happening in New York with Drury. Are these look, they were both, Kevin Adams was a gritty player, maybe not a finesse player. Drury was a great player. Like, but are they right in those roles in those cities? And does that where the change is going to be? Because you've got two great coaches now. Leviat, we said last week, is a coach where it gets on people's nerves and people shut him out. But the culture comes from above, right? And is that culture the right culture that's happening there? And that's why I say maybe it's the GMs that got to go in this situation. Certainly in Buffalo, it's got to be the GM because you're not getting rid of Ruff right now. You just brought him in. Leviat,
right.
this is only his third season in New York. So do you get rid of him when the players are calling for Drury's head? Like, even if they get rid of Laviolette, Drury's still there and the players want his head,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Like if you don't trust the management of the team, and that's ownership as well, too, right? Like
Yeah.
it's not just the GM. If you don't trust the ownership of the team, and sometimes that gets to like BS type stuff, like players aren't happy with facilities and
Yeah.
things like that. They want a different weight room, and like I don't have a whole lot of patience for that. But like
No.
if you don't trust your GM and trust your owner to be honest with you, to treat you fairly, to take your needs, whether they're family needs or personal needs or professional needs, into consideration when trying to find you a new situation. And that's part of what it means to be honest with the player. Then they're not going to play hard for you.
Right.
And they're certainly not going to resign as free agents. And the word around the league is going to get around, and nobody's going to sign with you as a free
Right.
agent.
Well, that's what I'm saying. These players go to other teams and go, you don't want to go to that city. Like, it's a mess,
Yeah. And by the
right?
way,
You go,
that's one of the reasons why I'm happy with Marty St. Louis, even though the Canadians aren't winning, is because everything you hear by all acclaim is that the players love him, and that word
right,
is getting around the league is like, this is a guy you want to play for.
right,
This guy gets you more than a lot of coaches are going to
right,
get you.
right. Which you're not hearing out of Nashville. Burnett's probably got to go. Again, Laviolette, as we said, is that type of coach where he can burn a bridge pretty quickly. And he seemingly has, but again, it's maybe a Drury problem there. But and Ruff has just been a great coach over the years. Trotz in Nashville has been a great hockey mind, but again, is he the right GM for this? He was a
I'll
coach.
put it this way. I would be more surprised if Barry Trotz got
Oh,
fired
he won't. There's no way.
than if Barry Trotz fired Andrew Brunette and became the coach himself.
That could happen for the rest of the season. I actually, I think you're right there. I think we're about to get into that Christmas break where there's a no hire, no fire, no trade,
Yeah, the trade
um,
freeze.
freeze at some point over the next week sometime. And I think it's a 3 or 4 day break. But I wouldn't be surprised if you're right that either before the holidays or shortly thereafter, Trotz comes down to the bench and tries to fix this for the rest of the season and then finds a new coach for next year. But I think the
Yeah.
problems, as you say, in Buffalo and New York, Buffalo's certainly got a culture problem they need to fix. I'm not sure Kevin Adams is the guy to fix it. When you got the owner flying in, at least he's flying in and recognizing he's got a problem. He's got to fix it. And he's flying in because he cares. Where
Yep.
are the Dolans in New York? You had a Stanley Cup potential team here last year with sights on a lot of people. We called them. They were going to be in the Stanley Cup final this year. No shot at this point. No shot.
Yeah.
And where is the Dolan family? I haven't seen anything in the press. I looked for it today. I couldn't find it. Where are the Dolans?
Uh, Dolan doesn't get too much as involved in the Rangers personnel as he does with the Knicks.
I get
Uh,
that, but maybe they need to.
I think Drury's a problem.
Yeah,
I think Drury's a problem. I think the players may have tuned Laviolette out at this point, which means he could be a problem, and you might need a wholesale thing.
right.
And it's possible that Drury tries to save his job by firing Laviolette, bringing in another name coach. Um, I think all that does is delay the inevitable. I just
Yeah,
don't see. It was always going to be a case is could they replicate what they did last year, and if they couldn't replicate that power play success and that penalty kill success that they had last year, they were going to struggle a little bit. I didn't think they would struggle a lot,
yeah,
and they've been. I mean, they haven't been Montreal or Pittsburgh defensively, but
right.
they've definitely sort of been hanging on to
Yeah,
Shesterkin's coattails to a
absolutely.
large
Well,
degree.
and that's why I still say that Buffalo and Nashville, I think, are lost causes for this year. Not think they are lost causes for this year. So you can take your time in making decisions on what you can do. I agree with you. I think the best thing Trotz could do is get rid of Burnett, step in behind the bench for the rest of the season, and figure it out, and really get a sense of what's happening from being on the bench with these players because he spent a lot of money to get a couple of them, really figure out what's going on, and then he can go back upstairs over the offseason and figure out, and by the trade deadline, figure out how to maybe make improvements and where he needs to fill in the blanks. Buffalo needs to make wholesale changes from a cultural perspective. And I think that means, unfortunately, Kevin Adams needs to go, and maybe you need a real new hockey man, someone with experience to figure that out, and someone people will come and play for. Because
Yep.
they'll play for Ruff, but they need to come and play for the GM as well, and the culture needs to change there. But again, I will say that I think New York, they got the personnel, they got the goaltending. They're not that far out. They need to make a quick change, and probably the coach is the way to do it in order to not lose the season completely.
Yes, and they were going to need to pick up a scoring forward and
Right.
a shutdown D.
Yeah. Well,
They,
the guys who aren't scoring this year need to start scoring.
yeah. I mean, what happened to Zibanejad? I mean, that guy, he used to
Oh,
scare me more than any other player because he killed the Canadians all the time.
yeah.
But he's
I,
not.
did you watch any of their games last week? I watched in and out of a few games, and they don't look like they care. They look like they're trying to get somebody fired. That game
Yeah,
against Buffalo last week, both teams looked like my men's rec league teams playing
yeah.
each other, and these are
And
world
they're
class players.
and now they're publicly grumbling about the coach. Like Capo
Yeah.
Caco had
Oh,
came out and didn't understand why he was a healthy scratch, and you can't
but
say stuff like that.
I agree with him, but I agree with that what you just said, but I also agree with his griping. A gripe is
Well, he hasn't been terrible.
he hasn't been terrible, but here you're picking on. as a coach, you're going to try and send a message, and you pick out a rookie forward, Capo, and you pick him out instead of taking one of Zibanejad or somebody else that's underperforming as a leader. That's where you send the message. I take that as the same reason last year when, if you remember, and I griped about this last year. This is what Keith did last year with the Leafs. The Leafs were going
He
through a
kept
bad
benching the wrong
spell.
guys.
He benched freaking Camp. Camp's not going to win or lose you a hockey game. You had to have benched when they were going through that terrible stretch. You had to bench Matthews or Marner or Nylander or Tavares, and he didn't. He benched their fourth line center, checking center. That doesn't send a message to anybody. It's just stupid. Same thing as doing this to the rookie. This guy's trying to learn, and you make an example of the rookie. Just wrong. So did we answer our question from the beginning of this? Which is the biggest dog pile of poop?
The biggest turd pile, I would say, my personal opinion, I still think you're right. It's probably 1A, 1B, but I think there's more steam coming off of the Madison Square Garden pile rather than the Buffalo pile.
Here's the way I would preference this then. I think the most immediate steam of poop is the Rangers. The longest term one, the one that needs to be fixed and do the most with, is probably Buffalo, because I think it's a franchise and it's a cultural thing overall. And I think in Nashville, it's just the player mix just hasn't worked this year. And I think that's why I think you're right. Trotch needs to go behind the bench and figure it out and get a sense of what he needs.
The only problem is if it is a personnel issue in Nashville, I will say this will be the last thing I say on. If it's a personnel issue in Nashville because they're too top heavy, then they just signed Marchessault and Stamkos to long-term veteran. Those are win-now contracts they were signed. Yes. Those are not easy contracts to unload. You've also got Roman Josi on a big contract and UC Saros on a big contract. If it turns out that this isn't something that you can fix easily, this is an impossible teardown.
But that's why I think that Trotz needs to go behind the bench and figure it out.
Yeah.
Because as a coach, because he's a coach, as a coach, he'll be able to get back there and go, okay, from the ice and seeing in practice and see who's gelling and who's not gelling. From sitting up here, he's seeing how they're playing, but he's not getting the sense of feeling it during games and getting what the chatter is on the bench. I'm sure Burnett's talking to him, but it's not the same. Burnett's also trying to protect his job. So he's probably not giving him everything. So I think he needs to get down there, get behind the bench and figure out, because you're right. They brought in Marchessault and Stamkos to win now. So they got to figure out the other pieces around the core 5 or 6 that they've got to fix it now.
Yep.
So
100%.
That's just agree. Rangers are the biggest immediate dog pile, and the Buffalo's
okay. So all right. So I would say if I had to rank, if 100 was the biggest pile of crap you ever saw in your life, I would say the Rangers are in 80. I would say the Rangers are in 80, Buffalo's a 70, and they're right below the Nashville. Call it a 67. That's where we'll leave it.
Bad story. So how much time would we be talking about this? Are we over our time now?
Oh yeah, we've already.
So we'll have to pick up. I sent you a couple texts over the day to remind me of some things. We got to talk about some of this fun stuff. Maybe next week while it's cooled down, or over the holiday.
Next week we should talk about about some fun stuff, because there won't be much news. And I also want to spend, as an LA native, I feel like I haven't done the Kings justice considering how well they're playing. So I want to talk about the Kings a little bit.
Yeah, they've been a surprise, which is great. So we agree that Rangers are the biggest immediate dog pile, and we agree it's a great thing the Habs have gotten out of the basement of the Eastern Conference. So congratulations
for a day.
You live on that for this week. I'm going to go see if I can find the infirmary and go help rub down some of the Leafs and get them healthy. And we'll see you next week.
Yeah, let's find out what the reverse of a voodoo doll is.
All right. See you later. Great talking to you.
All right, bud.